You're listening to the Sass Says podcast. I'm your host, Christy Rocha, also known as Sass. I identify as a woman, a wife, and a mother. That should tell you a lot already. And over the last few years, I've learned the value of talk therapy. I have seen how my inner work not only enhances my own well-being, but also my marriage, my parenting, my relationships. And in fact, you wouldn't be hearing this right now if it weren't for the work I've done. My mission is to debunk the misconceptions and stigmas around what therapy is and who it's for. Let's normalize working on our mental health and seeking help when needed. We've all heard of self-care, self-help, and self-love, but do you often wonder how to actually make it all happen? I do. You'll hear strategy-based conversations with professionals, as well as inspiring and validating stories from women who are just like you and me. Think of this podcast as the weekly therapy sessions you didn't know you needed, with a dash of sass, a lot of vulnerability, and me, relentlessly asking, but how? Hello. Welcome back. My guest today is Dr. Jisun Sunny Fisher, a licensed psychologist by trade with postgraduate degrees from Columbia University and University of Connecticut. Dr. J specializes in neuro-linguistic programming, hypnosis, and applied positive psychology in creating transformations. She considers herself a healing, teaching psychospiritualist who loves seeing transformations happen. Dr. J has been published on platforms like Goalcast, Fatherly, and Arianna Huffington's Thrive Global to share the message that life is urgent and we should all ask ourselves the ultimate question, did I matter in shaping everyday decisions? Okay, so this is a very much another intersesh, which basically means I spend 50% of the time interviewing Dr. J and another 50% of the time getting a therapy session with her. And I say again, because if you heard last week's show with Heather, you know that that was the case then as well. But I loved this conversation. It's so powerful, so moving, so many thought-provoking nuggets of wisdom, and I can't wait for you to hear it. Dr. J and I discussed the power of the universe, giving ourselves permission to be authentic, being right versus being happy, and what it means to seek validation. We discuss purpose, fulfillment, and spreading joy by experiencing more of the life you enjoy. So, without further ado, here's Dr. J. Hey, Dr. J, thank you so much for being here with me today.
Thanks so much for having me, Christy.
I'm really looking forward to getting to know you and your business a little bit better. It sounds super interesting. So we'll get right into it. I'm wondering why you went for your master's. Like, why did you become a therapist? What's the interest in all this for you?
That's a really interesting question. So, like everyone else, I went to undergrad not knowing what I wanted to do. And I probably into my junior year, my career counselor sat me down in her big office with her really big wooden desk and just sat there, crossed her arms and looked square me in the eyes and said, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" And I literally froze because I didn't know the answer to that question. And there was something about this level of commitment that I felt like the pressure of by answering that question at that moment, that I shrugged my shoulders and I said, "Linda, I have no idea."
Right.
So what I did was after my undergrad, because I had originally just checked off psychology as my quote unquote major at that time and age and where I went, that's kind of what we did. If we didn't know what we wanted to do, we checked off psychology. And I decided to just keep studying because I had no idea what I wanted to do. I didn't want to commit to anything. So I went and got my master's at Columbia and got it in clinical and counseling psychology. And even at that point, by the time I was done with my master's, I had no idea what I wanted to do. Wow. And I didn't want to commit to anything. So I just buckled down. And I said, I'm just going to keep studying. So that's what I did. And I went for my PhD at UConn. And of course, the 4 or 5 years after UConn, if I really, really wanted to, I could have sat there and I could have told you I have no idea what I want to do. Right. But my husband would have killed me. He would have been like, "That's enough studying. You need to get going." Yeah. So I that's what I did. I got into psychology because I was interested in it, not knowing that I wanted to do anything with it as a career. I was just interested because I didn't want to commit to anything. I kind of just went by the seat of my pants and I studied and I studied and I studied till I really couldn't study anymore, and started to need to make some money. So I became a psychologist, and where I am in life right now happened very synchronistically. I believe in the universe and my higher self, my spirit, my guides taking me to exactly where I need to be in order for me to fulfill my life and why I'm here.
Hmm. Yeah, I ask that question of most therapists that come on, and something that does come up a lot is, something even that I reflect on is that we're put in this position at such a young age to decide what we need to do with our lives. And I think worse off is that, at least when I was in college, you were made to feel some sort of way if you didn't know. It wasn't just
Right.
like, oh, figure it out, take your time, blah, blah. It was like, what? You don't, what do you mean? You need to get a job, you need to do this. And it's a shame, really, because I don't think at that age we know ourselves well enough necessarily to decide, all of us.
Right.
Some
And
do,
that's
but
and that's the thing. No one tells us at that point in time that we that this is actually a long-term, lifelong process of
yes.
learning who we are and what our interests are and where we want to grow. And so when we're in high school, when we're in college, we have this illusion that we need to decide what we want to quote unquote be when we grow up, and that that's what we're stuck with for the rest of our lives. No
Yeah,
one tells us that that's a lifelong process.
right. Yeah, and it's made to feel like this gigantic undertaking to change our minds or to
Hmm.
switch it up. And then sometimes people find themselves forced to change or forced to switch. And that starts off terrifying and maybe stays terrifying. But I am finding, especially through this pandemic, that the force of change is often bringing about some more alignment in what people
Hmm.
are wanting to do and actually pursuing.
Right. And
Yeah.
that's the thing. There is no such thing as an ending. Even death, as we think of it, it's really not an ending.
Hmm.
So they say that energy can't be created or destroyed. It's just changed.
Oh, wow.
So whenever we see or witness or observe something ending, it's just the beginning of something different.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I like that's reminding me of that you made sure to say the universe. Like that's something that I say a lot, and
Yeah.
it's funny. I'm hearing my husband's voice in my head every now and then. Like when something will come together or something happens, he's like, "Is it the universe?" I'm like, "It absolutely is." Like, don't hate.
I
It's
know he
funny.
probably says it in half jest and
Yeah.
just to kind of poke you in the ribs a little bit, but
Yeah.
I don't know about what your upbringing was, but I grew up in a Christian home and I
Mm.
was taught to fear in this all knowing, all creative God.
Mm.
And I was taught to believe in other people's perspectives and perceptions of what life was about, and
Mm-hmm.
why we're here.
Mm-hmm.
And it was through the process of learning that I love psychology. It was through the process of going through Columbia, the master's program, and then going to get my PhD that I really realized that I lived in fear for so long. And I think
Mm.
that's the thing that people are afraid to face their fears
Yeah.
today that causes the most chaos and havoc, and probably the depression and the anxiety and the unhappiness that we witness today.
Yeah. 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 I grew up Catholic, but my mom, I didn't always, but by a certain age, I kind of started to understand that she didn't really buy it. That she kind of had other ideas
Going
that,
through the motions. Yeah.
yeah, that
Uh-huh.
we were doing things like very traditionally for the sake of grandparents and maybe even my dad. And maybe early on, she really believed in it too. But as I got older, she was a little bit more free with with her feelings and a lot
That's
of
great.
my spirituality
Hmm.
and belief, even just saying the universe, like that comes from her, that comes from her mom, her aunt. So, yeah.
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 Well, now that you're in the space, Christy, where you can actually think and resonate with what feels right for you,
Hmm.
what's that like?
I have to say I feel like I'm actually only just beginning that phase.
Hmm.
Even at how old am I? I always forget how old I am. I think I'm
It's
32.
okay. I have to count too.
I don't know if I'm 31 or 32. I can't remember. I know I'm not 33, but not that that's a big thing. The threes, the double three would stick out to me. I'm 31 or 32. And a mom and a wife and all that. And
Mhm.
it's only recently that I'm really feeling like my thoughts and my voice are separate from my parents.
Mm,
It's a
yeah.
new feeling. And
When did that begin?
um
Was
I
there a specific trigger?
I think just through therapy, honestly. I mean, I think that it started a little bit for sure in the quarantine and having
Mm-hmm.
differing opinions about how we wanted to handle things and what we thought of certain procedures and all the things and just disagreements about that and also I think being in that isolation. Yes, I had the phone, but I wasn't in such a great place and I hardly answered the phone. So it's sort of that isolation sort of in a way gave me the space that I don't know that I would have had if that isolation hadn't occurred.
Mm-hmm. Where
Yeah.
you actually gave yourself that opportunity to think
Yeah.
and be more aware.
Yeah. And I think the hardest part truly is that, I love my parents. I thought they did a good job with me and and I still think that. I'm not, it just I think that that was a part that I had to really understand that in me having my own thoughts and my own
Mm-hmm.
feelings and beliefs wasn't a disrespect to them
Mm-hmm.
and wasn't saying, "Oh, I don't like you," or "I'm disappointed in you," or "You're wrong." It's just, and then it's funny because I think I shared a little bit of this with my mom, and she was like, I don't agree with everything her mom thinks and does. So, yeah, like
Yeah.
this was bound to happen, And I was like,
Mm-hmm.
"Oh, you're expecting this?"
Yeah.
Yeah,
I don't know if it's a sense of like we have this fear of disappointing the people that
totally.
love us,
Yeah,
right? That we
yeah.
love, or if it's a sense of for me, for a really long time before I did my own self-work, my emotional home, my go-to was guilt.
Mm,
And the guilt of feeling like I was abandoning people
mm,
was something that was huge for me. So as I'm listening to you talk about how you didn't want to disappoint your parents by saying that you didn't agree with everything they believed,
mm-hmm.
for me, if it was 3, 4 years ago, it would have totally completely triggered something like that sense of like, oh my God, that abandonment.
Yeah,
Like I'm abandoning someone,
yeah, yeah,
But it really is, like you said, it's in that space of doing our own inner healing, our own work, and journeying through the self-awareness
yeah.
that creates this almost like it's like you're planting that seed of giving yourself permission to be authentic,
Yes,
to show up.
the permission piece
Mm-hmm.
is really big too. I think I had someone on, Kerrie Mohr. She's a therapist, and she must have said permission 30 times in the interview because it's such a big piece. We often have these even if they're like unconscious, right? Just like these biases and these walls in our brain that because something
Mm-hmm.
was always one way for so long, that to give ourselves permission to change or to do something different or have a thought, outside
Mm-hmm.
of the
Yeah.
norm, it doesn't sound like it would be hard, but it is.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. It's totally wired in your DNA to seek that validation.
Mm-hmm.
So in your brains, if I were to go in there with like a probe, right,
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't tell the difference between what you were experiencing as physical pain or social rejection. Your brain registers both exactly the same way. Yeah. I'm
What?
looking at your face. Yes. Scientists cannot, doctors cannot, if they were to go and assess your brain waves and be able to look over what was happening in your brain, your neurons, your cells, they would not be able to tell the difference between whether you were actually physically in pain or if you were feeling the pain of social rejection.
Okay, we need
That's
this.
just the way we're
Yeah,
wired.
we need this on billboards. Like, I feel like that would validate so many people.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because even just the fact that generally speaking, in workplaces and things like that, mental health days and someone just having a tough day and needing to not come in is still stigmatized and still seen as like this,
A
no,
weakness.
yeah, a weakness, like toughen up,
Yeah.
just push through. And to know
Mhm.
that and to understand that, yeah, like if someone broke their arm and they're in pain, go
Of course
home.
they're gonna take the day off.
Right. Oh
Yeah.
man. Oh
Yeah.
wow. Okay. All right.
Hmm.
So this was a nice little half therapy session for me. Thank you. Um, but your practice now, your business. it's
Hmm.
it's not straightforward therapy.
No.
Yeah, so tell me about it. What's different
Yeah.
about it?
Yeah. Okay. So I was trained as a clinical psychologist to look for what was wrong with people, to see the anomaly and to fix, quote unquote, what's broken.
Mm.
But I found that in practicing that, all we were doing is perpetuating our weaknesses instead of celebrating our strengths. So that segued me into positive psychology, which then led me to something called NLP, neuro linguistic programming, and then hypnosis. And now I'm in this space completely where I am learning to, like you were saying, give myself permission to practice this journey and sharing with others what it's like to be alive in
Mm.
this time and age in a way that feels authentic and good to us, the way that I feel right, not the way that other people, other psychologists have told me I needed to do it. So
Mm.
when you consider as a general society what therapy is like, people think of someone who is either clinically depressed, clinically has anxiety, whatever that looks like, and there is a stigma attached to it. But the thing is, we all of us, even the fully function, probably most needed is this quote unquote idea of therapy in the space of high achievers, those that are functioning really well, right?
Mhm.
The moms in the homes that have it all, that are taking care of the house, the kids, and has a full-time job, right? It's the people that don't show it on the outside that are probably struggling the most on the inside.
Mm.
And the thing about our journey right now is that we not only need the therapeutic piece, which is going back and healing the parts of us that aren't true or don't resonate for our highest and best good anymore, but it's also the idea of if you were to take a really long ladder because you wanted to climb to the top of a building, you don't just lean it across any old building. You have to figure out which building you want to lean it across. But because we're not encouraged to use our own creative geniuses to figure out who we are, what sparks our joy, we go ahead and lean the ladders against buildings that we are taught to lean against. I want to quote unquote be a lawyer because that's what my parents find the joy of having their kid practice in, or whatever that might look like. So then we spend all of our time, 30 plus years, climbing this ladder, getting to the top of a building, looking down, only to go, holy smokes, I'm on the wrong building,
Mm.
right? This
Mhm.
is why a lot of people go through what is that called? Midlife crises,
Mhm.
because they're finding that they're not living a life that brings them joy. And
Mhm.
their lives don't bring them joy because they're not fully authentically expressing who they are. What they're
Mhm.
doing is they're playing roles that they expect other people want them to play
Mhm.
because we want to seek validation and we want to make others happy. But we never take the time to think about what makes us happy.
Mhm.
And you talk about there being a stigma with therapy. There's also the stigma of being selfish. But what if being selfish isn't about putting ourselves at the expense of other people,
Mhm.
but putting ourselves first because that's the only way we can actually spread genuine joy to others.
Mhm. Yeah. I'm just thinking, I agree with what you're saying. I think that I'm thinking of a few examples in my head of scenarios that I know of where someone's gotten to the top of the wrong building, and in my experience in viewing that experience from the outside, it seems as though actually admitting that is one of the hardest
Yeah.
aspects.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. Because, as humans, so we talked about how we're wired to seek validation because rejection feels like physical pain, literally in our brains.
Mm-hmm.
There's also the part of us as human beings where we would much rather be right
Yeah,
than be happy.
yeah, yeah. My mom has a saying. She always says, "Do you want to be right or do you want to get what you want?"
I love that.
Yeah,
I
that's
love that
it's one
because
of her
she'll
famous
ask that
ones.
question. Yeah.
Yeah,
And you'll say happy, but seriously, all the primitive parts of you that's just a mammal is going to say, I'd rather be right.
yeah.
Because being right means that there's a sense of familiarity, which means that there is security, which means that there is survival and safety.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Versus if we, yeah, go
Okay,
ahead.
so your clients, your sort of wheelhouse, are you
Hmm.
working with people who are at the top of these buildings and they're going, "Whoa," or are you catching them sort of maybe halfway up the ladder? Like where is your client base and I really like what does the process look like for one or both?
Yeah, okay. So I do have a lot of people that do come to me that are at the top of that building going, whoa.
Yeah.
And those are the people that, like we just said, we're talking about like midlife crises or just, and a lot of times we'll find that the less we listen to our hearts and what really sparks our joy, the louder that pain becomes.
Mm.
So a lot of the people that come seeking my help for the one-on-one services are people that are saying something's not working. And then
Okay.
I do have another half of clientele who come to see me because, and it shows up in relationships most.
Mm.
They'll say, I'm not happy in my marriage, or can you help me fix this in this particular relationship? Or I just lost the love of my life because she went and found someone else.
Mm.
Whatever that might look like, their pain speaks louder than ever before because they haven't been listening to what that joy sounds like.
That
So
makes
I do have
sense.
people that are at the top, and I do have people that climbed halfway but realize that their arm hurts and they can't keep climbing.
Okay. All right. So then, so I guess because I have the experience of working with a therapist where it's traditional in that sense.
Hmm.
In a session, let's say,
Yeah.
what are some of the differences between what you're doing and what, straight
Yeah.
up traditional therapy is?
Okay. Fantastic question. So I work under the premise that it's two parts and they don't just happen linearly, but they do happen simultaneously. So, in the first couple of sessions, I will work with my clients to clear whatever pain, trauma, or emotional baggages that they feel are weighing them down.
Mm-hmm.
And that happens quickest and most efficiently when we talk with the unconscious mind.
Okay.
And we can talk a little bit more about what that means in more detail, but that's pretty much how we start.
Okay.
And then we work to discover what it is that sparks their joy. Why are they here? And what is their purpose? Because my biggest pain point is to imagine myself in my deathbed and going, however old I am, going, I really need a do over.
Mm.
Can you imagine being on your deathbed going, I need a do over?
I can't. I
Like,
really
that's
can't.
heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So for me, being able to share the opportunity, that space, create that space for people to, I call it mental fitness because that's what resonates with people now.
Mm-hmm.
But it's really about what is your purpose? Are you living your purpose? Because purpose is not a noun. When it's a noun, it's more of that role of what do I want to be when I grow up? It's not something, it's not a destination.
Mm-hmm.
Your purpose is a verb. It's the way that you show up. It's the way that you feel.
Mm-hmm.
And when you are aligned to what your heart and your soul, your spirit is saying you're here to do and to be, you feel light, you feel at peace, you feel connected
Mm-hmm.
to yourself and to other people.
Mm-hmm.
It's inevitable. But those of us that are feeling disconnected from ourselves, disconnected from the people we love, we feel pain in different areas of our lives. We feel anger or resentment. It's because we're not listening.
Yeah.
And there's this saying, the obstacle is the way. I don't like that because I do believe that when we're aligned, nothing feels like willful. But I do believe the emotions that we have are our compass.
Mm.
So emotions, when you break it down, it's energy and motion. And this energy that's in motion is trying to tell you you're going the wrong way. Hey, Christy, you're going the wrong way. Christy, this way, this way, this way, right?
Yeah. No,
But we
that's
choose
good.
not to listen to it because it doesn't feel good.
Right.
So we just distract ourselves or
Scary.
we escape. It's scary, exactly.
Yeah.
So the principle that I work based off of is that we're here with a purpose. Every single one of us, we're supposed to be living our purpose, but we forget because we're not encouraged to follow our genius. And so this mental fitness component consists of three different areas. So we need self-awareness, we need self-acceptance, and then that leads to self-ascendance. So the awareness piece is about working through our fears, knowing what they are, and then working through our shadows. Understanding that we have this unconscious layer of how we view ourselves within this world that we don't even know is shaping 97% of how we show up. Once we know what that is, that awareness piece clicks in, then we get to the point of working on self-acceptance. It's forgiving ourselves. It's the part where we heal the inner child or the parts that can't seem to let go of something that happened 25 years ago that someone else did. And in doing so for 25 years, it's that Buddha saying, like, we hold a really hot burning coal with the intention of throwing it at the other person, but in the process, you're burning your hand,
Mm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's the process of healing yourself. Understanding that when you choose yourself over choosing others, that means things like perfectionistic tendencies, the imposter syndrome, right? This stigma about choosing my happiness over other happiness, like all of that goes away.
Mm-hmm.
And then once you're able to do both the pieces of awareness and acceptance, you get to the self ascendance. And that's when you are in complete alignment. Your mind, your heart, your body, and your soul are completely one in full wholeness. And then from that point, you realize that life happens in flow. And that's where the law of abundance or manifestation works and happens effortlessly.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really hard to do that. And all three things require consistent work. But it's kind of like going to the gym. You don't go to the gym for, a month and go, okay, I'm in good shape. I'm perfect for the rest of my life. You continue to go and you practice.
Right.
And that's the thing about this journey is that it's not a linear journey straight up. I'm sorry, it's this direction for you. But it's like this.
Yeah.
And the more you realize that it's not just three-dimensional, it goes multi-dimensions, it actually begins to do this. I'm sorry, I know it's going to be an audio thing.
I was just going to say she's spinning her finger almost like a tornado, like in circles.
Yeah, like a tornado, but it goes up.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
I feel like I just got like a soul hug.
Oh, I love that.
It's just nice. All of it. And it sounds like I'm also, the word that's coming to mind is relief. I feel like going through those phases in that process must feel like just a relief, just taking the stress and the bricks off the shoulders.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the best way I can describe it for myself and the way that others have described this journey is finding their way back home. For as long as I remember, even as a little kid, I've always felt this sense of being alone. And I didn't know that consciously until I did a lot of my work in the past few years. In the past 3 years or so, I started to get visions, if you will, or I call them downloads. And I thought I was going crazy. And because I'm a trained psychologist, I'm in my mind going through the list of what it means to have certain diseases or disorders. And I went, oh my God, I would totally be diagnosed with schizophrenia if I went in front of a psychiatrist right now. Literally thinking I'm going crazy. But as I'm working through my fears and my shadows, and I'm realizing that the part of me that needs to let go now is the part of me that is afraid to be crazy. And the reason why I had that fear of being crazy was because underneath that there was this layer of this fear of being alone. And that was, I don't know, it was like a light bulb went off, if you will, like the soul hug, like you described it.
Yeah.
But it's that process of doing this work that helps me to feel like I'm coming home.
So for myself and for anyone listening that has zero experience with anything of what you're talking about, and when you say doing this work, what are you doing? How are you doing it?
Yeah. The fastest way to start is to look at what scares you. Because what you really want out of this life in this world is beyond that fear. And that fear is just an illusion that you're not worthy of having that thing, that you're not capable of attaining that thing. That thing that you want in your heart doesn't exist. But when you do the work of facing that fear, your shadows, you get to that point where you realize I'm more than the shadows. And that's the thing about this life, Chrissy, is that it's not about getting rid of the bad. The human experience is about balancing both the good and the bad. That the quote unquote bad isn't actually bad. It's there with a purpose. It's there for a purpose.
Yeah.
And it's balanced in that yin and the yang, if you will, the masculine and the feminine side of each and every single one of us. And that's that dance of polarity that the human experience is all about, is learning to be very graceful with understanding that there's a part of you that wants to strive towards goals, and then there's a part of you that wants to sit back and let those things come to you, and knowing how to balance the two.
Yeah. I can guarantee that if we had done this interview a year ago, I'd be bawling right now. I think that a lot of what you're saying, I know because a lot of my listeners, a lot of my peers were moms with young kids who have this sudden loss of identity, who don't know what our purpose is. I mean, there was a time not too long ago, it's probably 2 years ago, I was literally Googling how to find your purpose. And like, and I
Mm,
know that I'm not alone in that experience. And so much of what you're saying about coming home and the awareness and the acceptance and all of it is, I feel like so many of the conversations even I have on this show with other, particularly moms and even women who just find themselves at a crossroad, it's like
mm-hmm.
there's so many people sitting in this stuckness. And I can imagine putting myself back, like I said, a year or two ago, hearing this and bawling out of want and desire to just do and have and feel everything you're saying, but also then walking out of this room and seeing two babies and diapers and laundry to do and dishes
Yeah.
to do. Like, it's just so all consuming. Like, do you have any advice or anything you can say to that woman, that particular woman, basically me a
Yeah.
year ago?
Yeah, so that's definitely something I hear a lot
Yeah.
is the sense of overwhelm, like you're treading water, you barely
Yes.
keep your head above.
Burnout.
Um, yes, burnout, but
Yeah.
that feeling of like losing yourself
Yeah.
is something so gut-wrenching. I think that's like underneath that sense of losing yourself is underneath
Mm-hmm.
everything else that we just described. That sense of overwhelm. Like you have two kids, they're both wailing, they both need their diapers changed. You have a sink full of dishes, and you have laundry that you have to put back into the dryer, and dry your clothes that you need to put back into the laundry because now they're all wrinkled. And there's just so much that you're like, these are the things I need to do. But what about the things that you are?
Mm-hmm.
What if
Mm-hmm.
instead of being, remember we talked about the polarity that dance? It's about not just the doing, but the being,
Yeah.
right? You can be Christy no matter how many dishes are in the sink, no matter how many kids need their diapers changed,
Mm-hmm.
no matter how many things on the to-do list you didn't do. And the only reason why those things feel compelling and overwhelming is because you're using someone else's ruler, someone else's metrics of what it means to be a quote unquote good mom, that feels
Mm-hmm.
overwhelming.
You're poking the bear on that one because it's such a big deal right now, especially with social media.
Yeah.
We all see everybody with the perfect houses and the perfect meals and the perfect
Mhm.
matching outfits and the Pinterest crafts, and we think that we need to do all of it all the time in order to be accepted or given some invisible badge of honor.
Right.
Like,
Right.
you're the best. Like,
Yeah.
according to who? Nobody's watching.
It all goes back to whatever trauma that we have. And again, trauma isn't something you experience on a battlefield because you're out in a different country fighting a war. Trauma is something that you experience that tells you that you're not enough,
Hmm.
that you're not safe. And so when you think about this, what you just said, this idea of like we're constantly on social media and we're seeing all of these glorified pictures of women who are only posting images that aren't even real of
Right.
how their life is good. But that badge of honor that you're talking about is that sense of like seeking validation. And it goes back to when we were kids and we're seeking validation from our parents. But because our parents aren't perfect, they're also flawed. They don't know how to express unconditional love.
Hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
if you have never experienced unconditional love, you don't know how to give it. And that cycle perpetuates generation to generation to generation.
So what is that truly possible?
Unconditional love?
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. You experience it and it's like it's a drop of what is the ocean and you're going, oh my God, I want more of that.
Hmm.
And so you pursue and strive for it. And that's where the acceptance piece comes from, is learning to love yourself unconditionally without any expectations. And you'll notice that you're beginning to actually become better at doing that, loving yourself unconditionally, when you realize you don't have any more disappointments from other people.
Hmm.
Other people don't know how to disappoint you anymore. You don't sense that, oh my God, you just didn't do what I wanted you to do. Like that kind of drops away from your map.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You got my wheels turning because I don't know. I'm like, how is that even possible? How is like to be?
Mm.
I mean, I don't know. It sounds lovely, but
Yeah.
it also sounds like a lot of work, which is not a bad thing. It just we
No.
want
Mm-mm.
that instant like,
Yeah.
okay, Dr. J's here. She's going to tell us in 5 steps how to get there. It's like not really.
Yeah. Well, it could be simple, but it doesn't mean it's easy. So when we
Mm,
think about someone who is a professional basketball player, right? Like Michael Jordan, what made him so great isn't that he was born with this talent, right? There are so many stories out there of how he didn't even make the cut for his high school basketball team.
right.
It's not that he had talent and only that talent, it's because he had the discipline of wanting to become the best. And the thing is, he didn't want to get up at 4 in the morning to make those free throws for hours every day.
Mm-hmm.
He did that because he loved that feeling of what it means to master that. But the thing is, we are all born with this feeling of wanting to master ourselves, master this illusion of what other people say we need to be. It's so when I think about the word spirituality and someone asks me, "How are you with spirituality?" It really, I go back to them and I ask them, what does spirituality mean to you? Does it mean that you have a particular set of routines where you're getting up at 5:30 in the morning, you're practicing yoga, or you're practicing meditation? That's not spirituality. That's just going through the motions. Spirituality is your practice of coming back home to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And it really does begin there. And it's scary because we're never taught how to do it.
Yeah.
In fact, we're very actively discouraged from seeking it. This
Mm-hmm.
is why things like Facebook and Instagram exist because they're going, how do I get more of your time? Oh, you're not on Facebook anymore? I'm going to ping you. I'm going to have this badge come on the front of your phone so you can come back to being distracted.
Yeah.
Forget learning about yourself, forget expanding yourself, forget being curious about yourself or your particular world. Let's draw you back in. Here's another ping. Here
Mm-hmm.
you go. Look, someone did this or someone liked your picture.
Mm-hmm.
And then we get sucked back into wanting that validation instead of learning how to seek it from ourselves.
Yeah. Are you on social media? No, you're
No.
not.
I got rid of it a few years ago when I realized how much of my time and energy it was taking.
Do you miss it?
I'm not going to lie, in the beginning, there was that withdrawal.
Yeah.
Totally that withdrawal because it's a habitual thing, right?
Oh,
You're bored,
totally.
you get on your phone. Every other minute you're like checking your phone. And I
Yeah.
got so when I there was one particular weekend, you know how on I don't know if you have an iPhone, but on
Yeah.
my iPhone, it'll pop up and tell me how much screen time
Yes.
I've spent that week. And it's
Yeah.
like when I saw the uptick and it kept going up every week after week, I'm like I there was one point where I said I just need to stop.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
So I did. And then I had withdrawal for 2 weeks or so and I wish I could say I'm good now, but of course there is that sense of am I relevant? Do I matter? Because everyone else is on Instagram.
Yeah.
Do I matter?
Yeah. Yeah.
But as long as I seek that validation from something like that from others, then I'm never gonna matter.
Yeah.
It's never gonna be enough.
Yeah. Yeah. Do I matter? Even, and I don't know, I feel like just the FOMO, you know?
Mm,
Like,
yeah.
oh, all these things are trending and people know about them and they're talking about them and doing them
Yeah.
and I would be curious too if even from the standpoint of your business, you can't meet a business coach today that doesn't say you have to be on social media, right? I
Right.
mean,
Yeah.
and that fear, I guess, of
hmm
yeah,
Well,
the
how do I have
relevancy,
this?
right? You said
Right.
the
Exactly. How
relevancy.
do I
That's
stay relevant if I don't
yeah,
have social media?
yeah,
Yeah, well, absolutely. That's definitely a question that surfaces.
yeah. So what do you do instead?
When that fear comes up,
Well, just
it's
yeah, or just yeah. What do you do with your thumbs all the time?
what do I do with my phomos or my phone?
Yeah, I said your thumbs.
Oh my.
Like I'm
Well,
just like, oh my, you
yeah,
can't see me when I'm just scrolling with my thumbs in
yeah.
the air.
I love to read, so I do a lot of reading. Of course, when I'm at work, I'm not
Right, you're
going
not
to
on
be
it
able to
anyway.
be on social media anyway.
Hmm.
But I keep myself busy with things that really do matter to me, you
Yeah.
know? Like I'm not a mother of children. I have two rescues, puppies,
Mm-hmm.
and I am present with them because I don't have to be tied to my phone.
Right.
Whereas I've seen my friends with puppies and they're like one hand, like one thumb, right? The left thumb is on their phone, their other hand is stroking their dog,
Yeah.
but they don't see the facial expression that their dog is making to them. Like, look at me, be
Right.
here with me.
Yeah. Kids are the same.
Yeah. Oh, I bet.
Kids are the same. They're just because and now and my son, it's so bad. He picked up a lotion bottle, and he
Hmm.
started like with his finger going like it was a phone, just tapping, tapping, tapping.
Oh.
My son is like 20 months old right now.
Oh
Tapping,
my
tapping, tapping, and then put the lotion bottle up to his ear and goes, "Hello."
That is
I was
so
like, "Oh
adorable.
no, what have I done?" Because he's with me all day.
Oh,
It's
that is so
yeah. So
sweet.
I was like, "Oh no, all
Yeah.
right, let's be more aware of this."
Yeah.
um,
And it's really hard. As adults, we can cognitively understand what we're talking about and
right.
be more aware and say that we can set the intention to separate. But when you think about kids these days,
Oh,
teenagers,
I know,
tweens, right?
I know.
Even younger than that. I have nieces that are not even 11, 12, and they have phones.
Yeah, and they're all on
And
TikTok. They're on everything.
yes,
Yeah, I
yes.
know. It's
So
terrifying.
when it's part of their culture, it's not part of our culture when we were growing up. So we can still be able to delineate the two, right?
Yeah,
Having a life without a phone, but they don't know or understand a life without a phone.
yeah.
So how do you teach your kids what it means to have self-acceptance, to have self-esteem, to have self-worth that doesn't stem from comparing themselves on a metric that someone else created?
I know it's awful. Like it's just and it's so hard. I know because I have nieces and nephews and I have friends who have older children and it's like that line between everything you just said and
Mhm.
then them coming home and crying because they're completely left out of
Right.
everything going on at school.
Right, right. And they are at that developmental age when that's important.
Like it's
Building
everything.
their
Yeah.
circle, their tribes. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So it's not, I don't think it's realistic as parents to say you can't have phones at all. Don't go on any social media.
Right.
It's teaching your kids the balance. But how can you teach your kids to have balance if we don't know how to have balance?
Yeah. No, it's a parent, parenting. It just
It's
everyone brings it back to modeling. And I say it like that because I don't wanna. I don't want to do it.
do what I say, not what I
Yes,
do.
I just want to live. Let me live. I know, but it's so true because we think it's adorable when they copy us and parrot us and mimic us when it's something cute.
Mm,
But they do it whether it's cute or not. they,
yeah.
they do it whether it's a positive behavior or a negative behavior.
And that's the brilliant thing. It's not just kids. Everyone in your life, everyone in my life, Christy, are just mirror reflections for who we are.
Mm.
Things that we notice in other people are the things that we're actually seeing in ourselves that we don't want to consciously acknowledge. And that's the thing
Oh,
about kids is
jeez
that they do it
Louise.
so purely. Well, let's take you back really quickly because I want to make sure we close that loop for you. What have you found works best when you talk about modeling, especially in within the context of balance? How do you model that in a way that feels good to you?
I am not great at it right now. It's hard. I've gotten better about, and this may not be what you mean, but it's what's coming to mind is, I get frustrated or I lose my patience and, my daughter, she's 3.5, she'll say, "Oh, are you okay?" And I used to
Uh-huh.
say, "Yeah, yeah, yeah," or whatever. And now I'll say, "Mommy's frustrated. Mommy's
Mm.
tired.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry I yelled or I'm sorry,
Yeah.
whatever." And she'll okay, mommy, and I think for me that is I want and then actually it's like a little while later, not that same day, but days or whatever, my daughter's in the car and she just goes, I'm like, "What?" She goes, "I'm frustrated." And I was like, "Oh, okay." Like I want and my point is in terms of the balance, it's like I want them to know and see that I have every emotion. I'm not
Hmm.
trying to pretend like I'm just always happy and everything's good all the time.
Yeah.
Um, it's hard though. It's hard.
It's such a brilliant shift that you did from going from brushing off what she just asked you
Yeah.
and pretending like everything's okay and good to actually, I'm going to acknowledge that this is what I'm experiencing. But because it's an emotion, it doesn't last anywhere more than 30 seconds.
Mhm.
I can let it come and go like a wave.
Yeah.
the reason why we go from experiencing an emotion and mistaking it from like a state, right? What is your state like? Is
Mm-hmm.
because we add stories to that emotion to make it more real. And it grows and it grows and it grows. And it's like, I'm no longer just angry for a minute in my day. I'm now an angry person. I wake
Yes.
up angry.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
We keep adding stories
Yeah.
to that emotion.
That, you know what? And you just perfectly described how I ended up going to therapy for
Mm,
about a year, almost a year. So we lost my sister-in-law. She was 42 years old to cancer, and it hit me hard. And um she died in January, and I started therapy in October, and it was like that whole time in between. Anytime I was overwhelmed, sad, frustrated, whatever, I would always just, I described it as I would start tacking things on. It was
mm,
like the kids would throw food on the floor and I'd get upset and then I'd go, "Oh, and my sister-in-law's dead." Like it was just like, and I that's how I talk. I don't mean to disrespect people, but like that's how I was
yeah,
struggling, and that's how it was.
yeah,
I was hearing it in my head, and it was like, "Oh, I'm late. Well, I'm late, and the kids are crying, and I'm overwhelmed, and I'm not happy in this and that. Oh, and she's passed on, and her kids are missing her." It was like every day I was just adding that to whatever was happening,
yeah.
and I find like it just got to be too much. It was
Hmm.
like, okay, it can't always be about her. You're tacking this on and you're making whatever it is just bigger and bigger and bigger.
Mm.
And I just had
What
a
did you find?
I think that for the most part I learned that I was experiencing postpartum depression,
Hmm.
anxiety, and that overall I think that I am like I don't know what the correct terminology is, but I'm very sensitive to like sound,
Hmm.
and so it was like, and I didn't expect that necessarily. I don't know why, because now thinking back it makes a lot of sense, but it was just like the toys making noise, the crying, the microwave beep. It was like too much,
Too stimulating.
too
Yeah.
stimulating. Yes. And I just had a lot of change in a short period of time. I changed jobs, I changed houses, I got married, I had kids, all in a very short period of time. And it just,
Hmm.
I kept going, this is what I'm supposed to do. This is fine. This is fine. This is fine. And it just, I wasn't fine,
Yeah.
you
So
know?
step one, right? Not that it happens to happen in any particular order, but you became aware.
Yeah.
What is it that you learned to accept?
That I'm not a failure if I accept help. That I'm
What are
not.
you instead?
Mm. It's hard. It's hard for me to say the words. I'm a good mom. I'm a good wife. I'm a strong person to accept help. And
Yeah.
can more easily say what I'm not than what I am. Right?
The reason why I wanted to recalibrate and I wanted to refocus your attention was because your unconscious mind, the part of your brain that is constantly receiving all of that stimulation, the information,
Mm-hmm.
it's literally at any given point in time, it's taking in millions of information, but you're not aware of all of them. You're
Yeah.
only aware of around five pieces of information.
Mm-hmm.
That part of your brain, Christy, doesn't know or understand the negatives. So when I say negatives, it's when you say I'm not a failure, your brain hears I'm failure or a failure, right?
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't understand the not. And it has to go the extra step to understand what it means to not be a failure, but it never, very rarely does that extra step. So you're
Mm-hmm.
constantly telling your brain you are a failure instead of replacing it with what you are alternatively. You're a strong woman
Mm-hmm.
for asking for help.
Mm-hmm.
You are a good mom for being aware of what you can and cannot deal with on a day-to-day basis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, I'm working on it. No, but I'm glad you said that because I do, I more easily, go from the what is not, um,
Hmm.
especially out loud to another person.
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know,
That's a great place to start. And then
Yeah.
making sure you shift your focus though, instead of saying, I don't want this, I don't want this, I don't want this. No wonder why you have it in your life, because that's what you keep telling your brain. That's what is more and more important to you.
Mhm. Mhm.
It doesn't understand what you don't or do want. It just understands something is important.
Yeah.
What are you feeding that thing?
Yeah.
Right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So you are a strong person, Christy. You are a good mom. You are a good wife. And
Mhm.
what does all of that mean to you? Why is that important to be all those things?
I don't really know yet. I mean, I know in the sense, I guess, that I, these are my people. Like I, they're my kids, they're my husband, they're my people for life, and I want the best for all of us, and I
Mm-hmm.
want my role to be, you know, meaningful and not and not there I go again.
But start there and then tell me what the alternative is.
I don't want to be checked out because I'm so overstimulated and overwhelmed all the time
Mm-hmm.
that I'm operating more from a place of survival than I'm thinking of Uime from surviving to thriving,
Yeah.
like
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't want to be yeah, I don't want to be this just like half dead shell of myself.
Mm.
I
You
want to
want
feel alive.
you want to feel alive. Yeah. Did you know that that word that I love, inspiration, when you come down to the Latin roots of it, it means to breathe life into someone.
Hmm.
So when you say that you want to be alive, it's that you want to feel inspired. You
Yeah.
want to feel
Yes.
more of life, right?
Mhm.
So whether we say we want happiness or we want more money, we want X, Y, or Z, it really all just boils down to I want to experience more life.
Yeah.
And for you, it sounds like you want to experience more life by creating a meaningful role for yourself in the context of your people.
Yeah.
You want what's best for you guys.
Yeah. I do, and I do think it's important to clarify that I also very much want it for myself.
Yeah.
I don't want to I don't. I want to feel like I had a life and a fulfillment and a passion and of all those things. I don't know what else I don't need to say anymore. I
Mhm.
think you get the point
Yeah.
for myself, and that on my deathbed I'm not going, wow, I was everything to everyone but me.
Mm. Yeah.
Because that would be me saying, crap, give me a do-over.
Yeah.
you know
Wow. Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. Something,
So
just
you want
something
to,
we're twiddling our thumbs on, working on over here.
that's all that's really, see, it's really simple. Doesn't mean it's hard. It's not that it's easy, but it's simple, right?
Yeah.
You want to live life to the fullest. You want to fully experience life.
Yeah.
And for you, that means right now that you are being the best at who you can be as a mom,
Hmm.
as a wife,
Yeah.
as a person.
Yeah, and it's reminding me of something that I ask here and there. I feel like, and I'm curious what your opinion on it is. Just the fact that there are these seasons of life, right? Like there are these phases where, well, I don't know. I'm going to say this, and maybe you'll tell me that no, but if there are these seasons where I can't always come first, or I can't, like, in a way, right? Like my kids literally cannot survive without
Mm.
me. And so I I felt like for a while I was putting so much pressure on myself to, you know, to seek out my stuff. Like, no one can see me, but I'm like, seek out what's in my brain and in my gut and heart, and
Mhm.
figure it out. And then there were times where I'd go, you know what, Christy, sometimes you just need to get through this day. Like, you just need to change the diapers and make the food and do the things because that's what you're capable of today. You know, it's just, I don't know. I don't know. I struggle with that. For me, that's a gray area. For ultimately, I landed on a non-gray area in the sense that my kids can't survive without me, but I still launched this show. You know, it was like, it ended up being like, you know what? We'll figure it out. But I guess what I'm thinking of is, you know, I talk to women all the time who, like, getting out of bed is hard, you know? Yeah. And so to think of, I don't know. Am I making sense?
Yeah, you are. So Christy, I hear you saying that you can't always be, according to what your expectations are of yourself inside, the best version of you, where you're constantly striving to be better and better and better.
Yeah.
Sometimes you are just finding yourself being more present and doing the things to get through the day instead of adding on that pressure of, oh, now I have to go ahead and create another podcast, or now I have to do something else to do what's best for me and be selfish and find what makes me happy. But what if what sparks you joy tomorrow is just to sit with your kids and just watch them twiddling their thumbs and laughing unbridled joyfully?
Yeah. And as you're talking, I'm realizing that that's also my block of feeling like when I'm doing the monotonous sort of day-to-day things, that it's not counting towards my productivity. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's, it's like if I go a day without doing something for this show or reading a chapter of a book that's helping my brain and my soul in some way, like, I'm like, well, what did I do today? I didn't do anything. And it's like, no, you actually did 35 million things, you know? And that's on me. That's me, you know?
Right. And that's where the balance comes in. You have to learn to be both the mom and the dad for yourself, both that feminine and the masculine role. The part of you that strives to achieve, to grow bigger, and the part of you that sits back and is nurturing to yourself and accepting and receiving. And it's like, I remember talking to a friend a couple years ago, and he was so adamant about how important it was for him to go to the gym 7 days a week, 7 days a week, working out, like really hustling, bustling. And I remember just talking to him because it was over the phone. I'm like, you need a day of rest.
Right.
You're like taking away.
I wish people could see your face. It's just like horror. Like, you need a rest.
If your goal is to get, you know, whatever his goal was at that point in time. And I remember going, if you don't give yourself that rest, you are just self-sabotaging. You don't see it now, but you're going to realize it in a couple weeks, a couple months, that you are self-sabotaging by not giving yourself that rest. It's like that infinity symbol. You can't always be on the left side. You have to move over to the right. Otherwise, that infinity symbol becomes very, very lopsided. Right? So you have to continuously move left, right along that line of the infinity symbol. You can't. The more you try and stay stuck on one side, the bigger and bigger and the lopsided and the more lopsided that gets, which creates that imbalance. So yeah, there are times as a mom, you're not going to want to get up and go to Pilates and do this and go out to the parents' meeting. It's okay.
Yeah, I know.
As long as you know what's important, right?
Yeah. I know it, but I don't know it yet, you know? Like, I know it on a, I can agree with you when I hear you say it, and I can actually even say it out loud to other people and advise them about that, right? Not that I'm in any position, but just I do sometimes. And then it's one of those things where the thoughts of that counter that, I don't even realize are happening most of the time.
It's all unconscious.
Yeah, it's very sneaky like that.
Yeah.
And I really have to be slowing down enough mentally to hear it and to be like,
Be
whoa,
aware.
put the brakes on that and
Yeah.
let's switch
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. I can
Yeah.
tell you that I am more productive in 2 hours of my day when I give myself time to have fun during the day versus if I don't allow myself the time to have fun and try and be more productive in the span of 8 hours.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's a whole other thing, right? Like, I know so many people, I'm not in that position, but it's, the companies are like more productive now with people working from home, but they still want them back
Mm.
in the office and all of that stuff. Like, it's, yeah, I don't
Yeah.
know. That's happened. That's the, what is it? What are they calling it now? Like the great resignation.
Yeah, yeah,
Having.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I know I've got you at full time capacity here, but I did um want to ask you about the teamwork that you do
Hmm.
too, the mental fitness for teams
Yeah.
and
Hmm.
whatnot. I don't know if
Yes.
that's like too involved for 5 more minutes, but just if you want to touch
So
on
in a
it.
really, yeah, 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 I can touch on it really quickly. So because of COVID, I stopped teaching classes and doing groups,
Okay.
and that will begin again, and that's kind of sort of been happening. So I guess I can touch on this to say that the group work that I do to the extent that I do them right now is if you go on my Patreon page, it's patreon.com/gsun. I post a lot of videos on there. I am on a sabbatical there for now, but that's where I do a lot of, it's not about so when I think about how I feel fulfilled, it's not about how many lives did I touch, but did I live my day to the most fulfilling? And for me, I feel most fulfilled not when I am doing just the one-on work or, just even myself to smaller groups, but when I am just expressing myself fully.
Mm,
And I'm able to do that on Patreon by teaching whatever downloads I receive, whatever where flow takes me.
okay.
So the teamwork has paused to answer your go back to your question.
Yeah.
It has paused for a little bit,
Okay.
but if that's something that people are interested in, they can find some of my videos on Patreon, and
Okay.
that will start up again. Right now, I'm just really busy writing a book. So
Oh,
once that's out, yeah, I'll be able to focus more on the teamwork again.
okay. And just to clarify, um, the teamwork is about creating that it's like corporate culture.
Yes.
Correct. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Hmm.
All right. Not. Yeah, I just realized I was saying teams, and so were you. But I had the context of what it is. Someone's
Yep.
like going like, what kind of team are we
Yeah.
talking about here? Okay.
So I did go into corporate culture. I did teach through the New Jersey state of labor. I forget the whole thing, but we did work with state of New Jersey to help individuals who are transitioning between careers.
Okay.
In addition to working with teams in small corporate settings, small businesses,
Mm-hmm.
and just even groups of friends
Yeah.
that want to come in or families, right?
Right.
That want
Yeah.
to come in and want to work on that sense of togetherness.
Okay. All right. Cool. And I guess Dr. J, this is going to be what I think now from talking to you, perhaps a pretty loaded question, but you might have a simple but not easy answer. Is there anything that you would have really asked yourself that I didn't think to bring up today?
Oh, wow, that's a good question. Anything that I would have liked to been asked, to have been
Yeah.
asked,
Yeah. Anything
that I
that
wanted to
really
share.
resonates with you or that you really want to share?
Mm. I think really simply, when it comes down to it, and we touched on it a little bit, but it's two parts. When you are finding yourself feeling stuck or like just things don't sit right, the world isn't turning, or life just never happens the way you want it to, I would really like to encourage people to look from within out. So we talked about people, our relationships in our lives being that mirror. There's a reason why they're there. So yes, we're wired to be social creatures because that helped with our survival. When we think about thousands of years ago, our ancestors, if we didn't belong in a tribe, our chance of survival completely diminished to almost zero.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, it's part of our DNA to belong to a group, but it's also really important for us to have relationships, not necessarily to belong to a group, but to have relationships because they teach us more about what we need to know about ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
So when you approach living life more fully, when you approach wanting to live more life, right? We talked about what the word inspiration means. It has everything to do with who do you believe yourself to be right now? What is your identity? And that's totally sneaky and unconscious if we're not consciously asking ourselves that question.
Mm-hmm.
Who do we believe we are within this world? Because what we tell ourselves unconsciously, those thoughts, those voices, those limiting beliefs that we're not aware of, they shape 97% of the way that we show up. So asking yourself if you are experiencing quote unquote negative emotions, constricting emotions, what is it that I need to learn about how I'm viewing myself in the context of this world? Do I matter? Am I leaning towards my purpose? Am I leaning towards why I'm really here?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Boom. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
I
No.
hope that was short enough.
No, that's yeah. No, that's great because yeah. Mm-hmm. Because they're not easy questions, but they're simple, like you said.
Hmm. Yes, it
Yeah.
always goes back to the basics. But I wanted to share with your listeners that if they want to, they can not apply, but I want to give away a free laser coaching session
Oh,
for one lucky listener.
okay.
Yep. And all they have to do is email me, drj@yourlifeinspired.com. And then
Okay.
in the subject line, just write Sass says bonus.
Okay.
And then whenever that drawing is, I will enter them into the newsletter. And then when they get the newsletter, they will see who won the free laser live coaching.
Oh my goodness, that's very exciting. Thank you so much.
You're
That's so
welcome.
nice. Okay, well I'll coordinate that with you off air here, but
Okay.
you've given me so much to think about, and this was certainly a version of a therapy session for me, so thank you. But
Well, thank you for
really,
having me and sharing the space with me. I really appreciate you
thank you.
and what you're doing, truly.
Thank you. Okay, so after listening to this conversation again, it feels like when you watch a movie for the second time and you see and hear and understand so many aspects of it that you missed the first time around. In re listening, my notebook is covered in notes and quotes and so many different ideas and concepts that I want to make sure I remember. But I think the one thing that's really sticking out for me is the idea of finding your way back home. You know, in motherhood and in this pandemic world, I truly have felt depressed and lost. And the work I'm doing in therapy and in my reading and in these interviews are all about finding myself, in a sense, right? It's like finding myself again, but also finding out and discovering who I will become. I didn't realize it when I put this show back to last week's with Heather, but they really tie so well together. Heather and Dr. J have different styles and approaches, but a lot of their message is the same. Fight for yourself, fight for your happiness, fight for your purpose. Go into deep, sometimes dark, almost always uncomfortable places mentally and emotionally to get to where you want to be. And where you think you might want to be might look actually completely different by the time you get there. But that's all part of it. I know that I struggle with the feeling of there not being this finish line to all of the self-work. But I also know that I'm really deep into it right now, so it's hard to see past where I'm at, and it's honestly even hard to just put words to it right now, even what I'm trying to say. I'm so in the middle of it. Did you get that? So I know I probably need to listen to this episode a few more times to keep kind of working through all of the things that Dr. J wants us to know. And I also want to share that I had the experience, I recently met Dr. J in person, and her energy and her vibe and everything you think they would be are exactly that. She's open and loving and kind and vulnerable and truly an amazing listener. So, thank you, Dr. J, for your time and your friendship. Thank you for listening. And I don't even know. I'm going to try to continue to find the right words to describe whatever it is that I'm doing in life right now when it comes to my evolution. Okay? How does that sound? All right, I gotta go. Goodbye. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Sass Says is a production of Luann Nigara, Inc. This podcast is meant to be educational and not meant to replace professional therapy or professional medical attention. To learn more about today's show and what's new in my world, head over to sasssays.com. Thanks so much. Talk later.